Hello YouTube, my name is Direct. Today we're going to be going over my track Cold Ground with Matt Van. We made the track in 2018, back at my house in New Jersey. And yeah, so let's jump right into it. So to start, I'm going to play you guys the first maybe a little over 49 bars, just to give you the idea of what the track sounds like. And then we can go over each individual detail.
To say what you wanna hear, I will bite my tongue till I disappear. Take me apart, let the pieces fall to the cold ground where they belong. I'll play the part of whomever you want me to be, 'cause my identity has been lost to me.
So that's basically the track, you get the idea. Let's start with the piano. So there's this very processed piano in the intro, and we'll play it without effects, dry, and I'll start adding them. You can hear what they each do. So to start off, we have two instances of PSPN 2.0, which is a multi-effect, but I love the pitch shifter because it sounds terrible. So right here, I'm pitching down 3 semitones and then pitching back up 3 semitones to kind of smooth out the sound. And it's also pretty quiet. So I'll turn on this compressor and this EQ, which bring up the presence. And you can hear it kind of smooths out the attack of the sound and sets it back in the mix a little bit. I also have a space designer, which is providing a little bit of room reverb. Valhalla Shimmer, which is on pretty much every track, and a compressor and an EQ. The compressor after the reverb will pull up the tail of the reverb after the notes of the piano and make it kind of sound like one sound combined with its reverb rather than a sound with reverb on it. I think that sounds pretty cool. We also have a pad, which on its own sounds pretty basic. Pretty cool sound. Little bit of tube amp for distortion and some reverb. It turns into a nice smooth pad. We also have this little tiny root and fifth, I think, which just fills out the low middle end in the track or in the intro. We also have some walla, but you can't really hear it very well. It's just a little bit of ambience in the background. Next up, we have this another piano that's been processed very heavily, but this is playing a melody. Right. So if I play that dry, it's a much higher octave. A little bit of EQ, a little bit of compression, and then sound shifter, which will kill your CPU. Pulls it down an octave, again, smooths it out. And then another PSPN 2.0, which brings it down another octave with a terrible algorithm. That sounds dissonant and terrible. I've got a Space Designer instance, which has the preset Air Current on it, which is under Warped Effects. This whole section, which is some of it's cut off because my screen's bigger than the screen that I'm filming right now. These presets are amazing for anything ambient or anything you want to have texture. Would highly recommend using those if you have Logic. Another reverb, another shimmer instance, a channel EQ for a little bit of presence, H delay and gains. The gains there's two instances of this because I automate it up at the end to bring the tail of the reverb and the delay up and big in the outro. Yes. And then here's the start of the track, this preset called Secret Dawn in Alchemy. I think Matt and I were just like scrolling through presets, trying to find something to inspire us. And we found this preset, which absolutely blew our minds. And here's that sound on song. Absolutely lovely patch. I was so inspired by hearing that. That's why we wrote the chords. Next thing we'll talk about is vocal and what processing we did there. If I solo the vocal channel and the vocal reverse reverb, we have a little bit of a reverse reverb into the first word. Pretty typical. It's a nice way to introduce a new section and let the listener expect the vocal to come in. Really basic. I can go over the effects on the group actually for all the vocals, which I'm not sure why I did it like that. I think there's only one vocal track, or maybe there's one or two, but I'll play the dry vocal. Matt's a really good singer, so there wasn't very much to do to this vocal.
Who am I?
Pretty dry. I have a FabFilter Pro Q, a little bit of a cut in the low end, remove a little bit of muddiness. Pro C2, which is my go-to compressor for vocals. Vocal mode is amazing.
Who am I?
Basically just levels out the vocal pretty nicely. Ozone Imager and then A1 stereo control right after. Ozone Imager is adding space, kind of like a room reverb would. A little bit of stereo width, obviously. And then I mono the low mids using this plugin. This is similar to like the utility in Ableton. I think Logic now has a way to just do mono bass in its own direction mixer, but that wasn't an update while we made the song, so I used this. There's also a de-esser, a little bit of room reverb, H delay, which is just doing a dotted eighth note, and a Valhalla vintage verb for something super long.
Who am I?
Underneath, we have the throw, the delay throw, which is essentially not a delay throw. Traditionally, you would just have a bus that you would automate up, and that would have delay on it. I find that annoying. So I just cut the words and shifted them over a half a bar. Also, I get to apply my own custom set of effects to those, so it sounds pretty cool.
Who am I?
Pretty simple. Right before the drop, we have a little space. If we listen right here, we have a very small bit of white noise. It's actually an ambient recording of a vineyard, apparently. Just kind of leads into the next section. I didn't want to do like a sweep. This is really gentle. And then this is where the fun begins. We can talk about drums. But let's first talk about the bass. So the bass is really simple, as you probably imagined. It's simply two saw waves detuned with a low pass. Actually, there's two low passes. There's a 4-pole low pass that's key tracked. So when you move up and down the octaves, the same number of harmonics in the bass remain. The volume will stay the same throughout. And then I actually break that by putting another low pass and a little bit of distortion after, just to keep it in the spot in the mix that I like. I normally do not do that, but I felt like this song needed it. There was a couple octave jumps, I guess, that probably stood out to me. A little bit of chorus and the effects, and a low cut there to bring a little bit of mono to the low end while having a little bit of stereo width on the bass, just for, mixing it properly, fitting it into the mix. I also have a little tiny Reese sound, which was made in Serum and then resampled into Serum again, which is right here. And there isn't very much filter stuff going on. Apparently I have probably a notch. Yeah. A notch and a low pass, I think. Yeah. Notch and a low pass just to make that movement pretty basic. We also have, we'll just work our way down to the drums. I also have this pad, which I think is just Matt Van singing into my iPhone. I'm not 100% sure on that. A little bit of reverb, Valhalla Shimmer, just to makes it into a nice spacious pad. There's not much other pad stuff in this track, but it does the job. Okay, and then we still have the octave piano effect here. We still have Secret Dawn. Let's do the drums. So in my coins and shit section, I don't know why I named it that. I guess probably because I named those samples like that. We have a simple coin percussion loop. You may be asking why each one has its own track, but I really, really like to EQ them all separately. Probably because I'm crazy. But I think that being able to EQ out some of the resonances that kind of get to me sets it back a little farther in the mix. And honestly, it didn't take that long to do, probably 5 minutes or so as we were like putting them all in. And then below that is the hi-hat bus. On the hi-hat group, I actually have a very steep low pass on the Pro Q, which at the end of every bar, we low pass down. I mean, not every bar, every section in the song, we low pass down. For effect, it just sounds really resonant and interesting. But we'll go through each sound inside of this group. So I do have a battery here with a great pack of hi-hats called Crispy Hats. And those just layer underneath the coins, which I think sounds really good. We have two sounds, which are, I think, a pill bottle being popped open. Pretty simple. Add a little bit of rhythmic interest. And then two hats, some shakers, vinyl morphing sounds, just to fill it out a little bit. Then I have this trap hi-hat loop, which is basically, I think, just like an 808 type hi-hat with a low pass filter, but it was in the loop and we liked it, so we kept it. Now we also have some Foley like type sticky sounds and things, which might sound gross on their own, so I'm just gonna solo them all. Yep. Yeah. So there's gum chewing, which we definitely recorded in my studio. There's another slobber sound, and there's sticky paper, which is out of my sample pack, which I always like layering under rim shots and things. And then speaking of rim shots, let's talk about the snare / rim shot, which is, there's two layers. I usually go a little bit more complex, or at least I do a little bit more processing, but this one just sounded good, so kept it. Nice. I guess that's a 660 drum machine. I don't know what that is, but 660 drum machine rim shot with a bit of EQ, reverb, I think more reverb and stereo widening and CLA vocals, and Pro R for a tail. We also have the main rim shot, which I guess is a bit more clappy. In a lot of like garagey stuff, there's often like a long clap layer that's just like I guess I probably put that in for that effect. And then we have a kick, which is simply a low passed serum kick that I made. Simple as that. It's just sine wave pitch down. And then I just low passed it to remove the high end, because I sometimes find the high end on synth kicks to be too much for darker music. And yeah, that's pretty much the drums. I think in the second half of the drop, during the vocal chop section, we had a 16th note hi-hat. I did this pattern in LFO tool to just vary it up pretty easily. And that's just a white noise hi-hat, I think, made in Dune. A little bit of white noise, decay, high passed like crazy. Adds a bit of brightness too. Okay, and then let's look at the vocal chops, which are fun. There's a lot of effects on here, so let's take them all off and listen to just the vocal chops playing.
Say
Pretty simple. I have a vocal transformer, which is for format shifting. Bit of EQ, compression, and distortion. Ups the texture. And then I use this vocoder which is just a pitch tracking vocoder, but I don't have the pitch tracking on, I don't think. Essentially, I'm using it like you would in Ableton with, I think, the carrier being the modulator. If I might have that backwards, but the carrier being the modulator in the vocoder basically turns it into a filter bank. And that's basically what I'm doing here. It brings up the volume, but it also just makes it sound more wet and watery, a bit smoother and a bit more artificial, which I like. Then we have vocal synth, which is, but there's some effects on there. I can open that up and show you. So I just have polyvox and then a delay, which I think is just a slapback, a distortion and a filter and a chorus, which just adds just a bit more texture. Ozone Imager, OTT, and Pro C2, just to bring up the stereo width as well as even out the frequency response, make it more present, and also compress to bring up the volume. Valhalla Room, then there's the effect rack from Sound Toys, which I probably was going to put more effects in, but it actually just has a primal tap for delay. I don't know why. And then another compressor, which is just there to bring up the tail and make it feel a little bit more as one sound. And that's pretty much the first drop. There's these little tiny blips from Matt.
Lost to me.
Pretty simple, just some filtering, and it's kind of the delay throw, but I'd wanted it in audio. And then, yeah, we have the second verse. There's nothing really interesting there. And then in the second drop, we have a couple changes. So first off, the chord progression changes slightly. In the original chord progression, we walk down. And in the second drop chord progression, we have a walk up, which I think just kind of makes it a little brighter and gives you something to focus on that's a little different. And then we have the vocal chops again in the first half of the drop. A new vocal element, which comes in, which I can play. I'm pretty sure that is completely wide, meaning that if you listened in mono, it would completely go away. But I felt like it was such a subtle effect that it didn't matter. If we went to mono, if you were listening on a mono speaker, you wouldn't be missing out anything. So I made that full wide. So one is completely phase inverted from the other, at least as far as I'm aware. And yeah, the only other thing in the second drop is the strings. Which sound lovely. And then there's this sound. Nice, simple bell sound that we just add for a little bit ear candy. And then I'll show you what we did to the octave piano effect for the outro, which this is why I have two gains on the like piano thing. So if I solo this, we've pulled up the feedback on H delay, which will start feeding into itself and distorting and also getting louder and louder. But I'm also gaining it up with two gain plugins because I needed more gain than they had. And then that's what we kind of use as the outro for the track. I thought that was a nice way to end the song. I think that's pretty much it. As you can see, there's a lot of percussion layers, but that stuff's addicting to me. I love making the percussion layers. And Matt's killer vocal, which absolutely added so much. And yeah, a lot of fun to make this track. And thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe, and I'll do more of these in the future.